Welcome to the Invero Show, where the team from Invero brings together thought leaders from our customers and partners to share our combined knowledge of the Microsoft Cloud ecosystem with the world in hopes of helping you along your cloud journey. And now for today's episode.
This together, I'll say about 6 weeks ago, and then we got some invitations going, and even that to now, how much the Copilot offers and availability have changed is astonishing. So it's been a really fun ride for us prior to that, but in particular, launching this as an episode, as a topic, and then literally every day. And you see some of my colleagues here. Craig's on, our founder and CTO of Invero. Steph's on, who leads our Microsoft licensing practice, and then Ian's on, who is our sales lead for Alberta and the Prairies. Over the last 5 or 6 weeks, as we prepared for the show, literally every day as we connect, we're like, oh, but there's more, and there's more, and there's more. And so Steph and Craig have done a really great job of tightening that up to what we think are the most kind of on point and relevant components of that. I was chatting with Steph earlier today, and she was saying, like you could have like a 1,000 hour show to just keep unpacking all of it, right? So we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it to about 45 minutes here and do our best to navigate it to what we think is most interesting to our audience. And when I say we think most interesting, a lot of that's coming from some great conversations, some of which we've had with some of you that are on this call. We've had a really great amount of client conversations to tackle this around use cases, challenges, governance, opportunities. How do I license it? How do I buy it? What's available now? What's coming later? So this is all what we're going to unpack here. I'll just kick off the agenda, and so I'm going to kick off like why is this worth learning about, which I think is quite intuitive already, and then I'll just very briefly explain how it fits into Invero's go-to-market. Again, some of you are quite familiar with Invero, others that's a new organization to you, so I'll just take a moment and explain that, and then I'm going to pass it over to Steph, who's going to go deeper into what are all the Copilots and what's available and how do I get that and what do I need and those kind of things. And then Craig's going to take that a little deeper on the technology standpoint, but still where technology meets business value and opportunity in terms of weighing out the viewpoints of Copilot versus, or maybe that wouldn't fit for Copilot, maybe that would fit for Azure OpenAI. How do I go about that? How much would that cost me? How do I get into that? But also, what's that going to cost me per month? And then we're going to talk a little bit about Copilot readiness. So some of the things that you might want to, that you should consider before just turning that on from a governance and navigation standpoint. And then we'll wrap it up with how we think we can help you through this. So without further ado, I'm going to dive in here. Here's a slide. I think all of us have seen versions of this, and it just kind of puts that reinforcement of the reason that we're all here. I think is because AI is here. It's happening, and I would suspect that many of you have this balance of excitement of opportunity and realization of the opportunity, balanced with not wanting to get left behind. All of you are stewards in your own business to serve your employer, your clients, your stakeholders, your shareholders, to understand how is it that AI potentials could give us a competitive advantage or not, and how do we make the right decisions from a business opportunity perspective, technology investment, and navigation. So hopefully that's why everybody's here today. That's certainly what we see. So just real quick, for those that are less familiar with Invero, as I mentioned, Craig's on here as our CTO and our founder. Craig started Invero in 2017, and you think back to that's really when Microsoft set up shop in Canada with their Azure facilities in Canada Central and Canada East. And Craig, along with some of the folks that he'd been working with, had really deep backgrounds in public cloud and Azure. Craig's an entrepreneur at heart and said, look, I'm going to start up a business that's going to help organizations adopt and realize all this value. Fast forward a handful of years, and boy, have we ever evolved from those beginnings of heavily focused on Azure migrations and landing zones and just helping customers get into the Azure platform, to rapidly evolving to helping them modernize application sets, helping them around their data estate and data strategy, helping them modern work, helping them in security and licensing, and really how it all weaves together. So that's just a bit of the overview on Invero. And if you look to the bottom of the slide, that's our mission. That's really what we think about every day, is how do we help all of you maximize the value out of your investment in Microsoft? It's all we do. we don't focus on AWS, we don't focus on GCP. We are a 100% Microsoft shop, and we go really deep into that technology arena. It got me thinking though around this conversation around AI and Copilot, and where does that fit into what you see here in terms of our go-to-market. I thought this was pretty interesting to think about. Well, it certainly shows up here as a starting point of, when I say productivity tools, SharePoint would be, the foundational component of what I'm referring to there. So absolutely, Copilot and SharePoint are heavily connected, and Steph and Craig in particular on the tech side of that's going to unpack that through the conversation. But it shows up here around strategy and governance, and we're going to talk about that as well. Of that's great how SharePoint and Copilot connect, but how do you manage that so that you don't end up with any kind of regrettable scenarios? It shows up here in the Power Platform, especially when you get into more customization of Copilot or Azure OpenAI and getting that automation of efficiency. So you got to have some knowledge there. But geez, it also shows up in machine learning and actually the AI functions that are more around kind of Azure OpenAI. But then wait, it shows up in application modernization, because if you're thinking about Azure OpenAI and building a custom app, well, for us as Invero, we need to have those app development skill sets. And then it comes back into strategy and governance. If you're thinking about your overall AI journey, there's a really good chance that's going to connect you to Purview as a broader kind of governance foundational platform for you, which ultimately takes you back to, well, geez, we better think about a data engineering of how are all these different data assets classified so that you can get the maximum value out of Purview or whatever governance wrapper you put on this whole thing. And then last but certainly not least, you got to buy it, right? And Steph's here to help you figure that out too, of what are all the there aren't enough arrows. Thanks for that. That's the last one, I promise. I just thought it was interesting of how when we talk about AI in terms of our business, it actually shows up in literally everything we do. So that's my intro and my overview here. I'm pleased to introduce Steph and bring her into the conversation here to go a little deeper into, let's just start with some basics here. So Steph, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So I'm a pretty big licensing nerd. Anyone who knows me knows that, but maybe not a big overall technology nerd. So I had to do a little bit of background on this. So in case you started from a similar place as I did, here's just a couple of key points for some of the background around OpenAI and its partnership with Microsoft. So OpenAI is approaching the ranks of Kleenex and Velcro as what started off as a brand is now more of an idea. It's more of what you think of just as a general term. So OpenAI is the company that created ChatGPT. So that's the AI chatbot built on LLMs that you can use natural language to answer your questions. OpenAI introduced what they call the API, which is going to allow developers to call on their LLMs for AI tasks. Now, Microsoft has invested billions in OpenAI and has developed a pretty strong partnership with them. So they are utilizing ChatGPT and their LLMs to create these AI-powered assistants, and they have branded them Copilot. So that's kind of the first important point. Copilot is really just a Microsoft brand. It's a lot like when you see 365 tagged to something, you know it's a cloud-based SaaS solution. And when you hear Defender, you know that that Defender is a security product. So Copilot, very similar. Copilot is going to indicate that it's that AI-powered assistance tool. So what does that actually mean? I took this as a screen grab just really from asking Copilot, what is Copilot? So this is a look at that chat bot part of the Copilot functionality. And so one thing to note here, the really nice part about this is that it's giving you all of the references. So it's showing you where this information is coming from, because when you're asking Copilot questions, it's just picking up on those keywords. But you can also see this is leading to a bit more confusion, because Microsoft is calling so many different things Copilot that when I just simply asked what is Copilot, it's picked up some answers from Copilot for M365, some just general Bing Copilot. And so there is a lot of confusion around the terminology, what this is going to do for you. And when you're actually asking it questions, it's important to note that it's missing the logic and the context. So if you are asking questions, it's giving you these reference points so you can go check out and validate these answers. Very important part of that. So there are so many different copilots, which is, again, adding to a lot of this confusion. As you can see, it feels like a little bit like an episode of Oprah's Favorite Things. You get a Copilot and you get a Copilot. Copilots for everyone. So Microsoft introduced the concept of Copilots 2 years ago with GitHub Copilot. And so what they've done is they are rolling out all of these Copilot experiences across their core products and services. And they're using plugins to connect to data. So that is another important thing to note, the differences between some of these Copilots, who they're going to be for, what kind of roles, and what data is being connected to. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what all of these different Copilots will do for you and how they're licensed. But the really exciting thing that Microsoft has announced, and really the first Copilot for everyone, is that Copilot for M365. So let's talk a little bit about that for a few minutes. All right, so there are many, many different Copilots within Copilot for M365. And it's going to support the end users and their productivity on 3 different categories. So summarize, search, and create are really the ways that Copilot is going to help productivity. So summarize comes into play for things like Teams, Outlook, OneNote. It's going to help you summarize meetings. It's going to help summarize big, long email threads. I actually used this the other day to summarize a big email thread I got looped into between Microsoft support and a customer. Oh man, did that save me so much time with that summarize. It was very long. So saving some time there. The create portion, it's so much easier to revise a document rather than start new. So when we talk about how this is going to help your end users, it's going to be on what Microsoft is calling a low value busy work kind of thing. And that's really important to note. So there's been a couple different entertaining lessons learned from people using ChatGPT already. So maybe to highlight that and what I mean by some low value busy work. A good funny story is the US attorney ended up getting disbarred because they used ChatGPT to find case law and precedents, but it actually pulled from episodes of Law and Order. If you're going to be using that for high value material for your job, definitely want to validate that it is accurate and correct. So what Microsoft is saying this is going to do for your end users is really give them back about 10 hours a month, which is amazing. So the biggest criticism I hear about this Copilot for M365 is the cost. When you think about it like that, the return on investment of your users' productivity, getting 10 hours back is significantly more value than really that $30 a month price point, in my opinion. But it's going to be important to get your end users to adopt this and to really use it. There's definitely a lot of tricks. They're going to have to learn prompts. There's a ton of Microsoft resources, however. And so one thing to note too is that Microsoft is really invested in customers using this and being successful in this because they want you to adopt this and keep it forever and ever. There's prompt guides, there's email campaigns, there's a ton of support Microsoft has put out for supporting you in getting your end users to really utilize this. So again, we talked about how to use the summarize, and then there's the search. So the search is going to come into play for searching for documents and searching for things in Teams. I was playing around with Copilot and in Teams just said, hey, show me some messages about this specific customer as I was preparing for a meeting. and it pulled up some chats that I had access to through a team that I was part of, but they were from a couple of years ago, and it gave me a lot of great background information that I would have never found otherwise. It saved me a ton of time on some history there. So you've got the summarize, search, create. Copilot is definitely been the Copilot for M365. See, I can't even get the terminology right, and I'm presenting this. So Copilot for M365 is definitely what's gathered the most excitement. And I have to say that the Microsoft introduction rollout of this has been a little bit painful and confusing. So maybe let's talk about that next. It's just how that came about. So Microsoft announced general availability would be November 1st, but that didn't actually really mean general availability for most customers. Before, in that time period, before January 6th, when they announced a bunch of changes, and November 1st, you had to be an EA customer. You had to have a special deal with your Microsoft account manager to get this into place. You had to buy at least 300 seats, and your users had to already have an M365 E3 or E5 license. So on top of the existing investment, that actually meant another probably $150,000 a year for those 300 licenses. Not a very popular rollout from everything I've been hearing. So on January 16th, Microsoft definitely made a bunch of changes to those very strict parameters for adding Copilot for 365. So now it is available for a regular purchase on an enterprise agreement, on a CSP agreement. You can buy it direct in your tenant on a credit card if you'd like. I will say for CSP, it is not available on the month-to-month term commitment. You do have to commit for the full year and pay it upfront. However, you don't have to put your Copilot licensing on the same agreement that the prerequisites are on, which was something that was very interesting. And they definitely have increased those prerequisite underlying licenses. So now you can add Copilot for 365 if you have O365 E3, or if you have Business Standard or Business Premium. And there's some other options for education customers as well. And no minimum seat size. So you can actually order one. Not quite the recommended approach, but you definitely could. The Microsoft recommended approach for how to start rolling this out is actually funny. I've heard multiple different Microsoft people give slightly different answers, but there definitely are some recommendations around buying it for perhaps a whole department, a subset of super users amongst different departments to really get a good idea of some of these use cases that your customers or your end users are going to use this for. So if M365 Copilot is meant for your end users to increase their productivity, what are all of these other Copilots that I have alluded to actually going to do? How are they going to cost? How much are they going to cost? How are they licensed? There is so much information out there, and at the same time, not nearly enough on some of these specific questions. So I did a bit of digging, and let's talk through some of these things. So Office and Windows Copilots, these are the ones that are meant for your everyday users. It was previously called Bing Chat, and now it's just plain old Microsoft Copilot. So that's one important distinction. Copilot for 365 is probably what everyone is thinking of, but what's actually just Copilot is that Bing Chat. And so there's a couple of things. The Bing Chat piece is really only going to pull data from the internet, from publicly available information. It's one of the biggest differences. It's $0 for consumers. It's also going to be included in M365 licensing if you want to put in that Bing Chat Enterprise and then use that commercial data protection as well as your users are searching out on the internet. We talked a little bit already about Copilot for 365. So in addition to all of those Copilots for the applications, what else you're going to get with Copilot for 365 is access to the Copilot dashboard, which Craig is going to talk a little bit more about later. It's going to help give some metrics on readiness and utilization and things like that. And it's also going to give you a user license for Copilot Studio, but there's going to still be other costs associated if you want to start using Copilot Studio. So Copilot for Viva, that's one that doesn't have a ton of information out just yet. It's supposed to improve the end user experience along with Viva, but giving you more insights into how to do that is how Microsoft is positioning this. Not a ton of information yet, but if that's of interest, let me know and I will keep track of this and fire updates as I see them come in. Copilot for Windows, again, you're going to get access to that through existing Windows licenses. And then it's really going to be utilized either through your Windows taskbar with Edge, but there shouldn't be any extra costs for utilizing Copilot for Windows. So again, these are your everyday Copilots for everyday users. The next set of Copilots are more intended for IT users. And so the first one, Azure Copilot, that's going to be the way that as your IT people are working in Azure, they're going to be able to use natural language to inquire through that chat UI. What is this workload going to do? What is this feature? How much will this cost? How do I enable this? Things like that, natural questions to help support getting things set up in Azure. So that right now is on an early access only program. You can apply. Reach out if you're interested. I'll let you know how to apply for access to that program. See if we can help you on that bit. It should be available. I would suspect in the next few months. Copilot for security. That one is very interesting. So this is really meant as it's to save time as you investigate and analyze threats to your environment. So it's going to tie into the other security products from Microsoft to give you all of that insight into the threats and really what's going on there. So again, this one is still in an early access program. We do expect a lot more information about this over the next month. And I believe our friends at Defenda are doing a Copilot security specific webinar later this month. There are going to be some strict licensing prerequisites for this one. Just for simplicity, I threw on there that E5 or E5 security. It's a little more specific than that. You're going to need Defender for Endpoints Plan 2, you're going to need Enter ID Premium. If this is of interest, reach out and we can talk about some of the prerequisites. And again, I can update you as more information comes out. So GitHub Copilot was the first one announced. It's been around for a couple of years already. There's a few options, individual, business, enterprise. Again, that relates to the security levels and the data access, things like that. And so the reason it was introduced was to help search for existing code that's already been created to really speed up some time for developers. Copilot for Power Platform. So this is going to be the way that some of those citizen developers that are deep into the Power Platform, which is that no-code app creation solution. So with the addition of Copilot for that, then your citizen developers can also use natural language to help create these apps a little bit easier. So it's currently being rolled out by region. It will be included in the Power Platform premium licensing, so the per user versions of the licenses. A lot of the functionality and a lot of the features for these copilots existed in another form previous to being rebranded and repackaged as Copilot. So the Copilot for Power Platform used to be part of the Power Virtual Agents. And another thing to note about it is that it does utilize those AI builder credits. So as you are keeping an eye on your end user licensing for Power Platform, I'm sure you're already aware the Dataverse capacity comes into play there, but now also keep an eye on those AI builder credits if Copilot's going to be in use in your environment. Reach out if you want to talk more about that. Also, Copilot Studio. So the Copilot Studio is how you're going to customize your own Copilots or expand on Copilot for M365 with the plugins that you can use to then access additional data. And so you can really hone in on a very specific use case for Copilot that you have in mind and customize it for your own use cases. And the Copilot Studio itself, because it's Copilot Studio, you're going to again use those LLMs and natural language to create the Copilots. The $0 subscription for your users to get access to Copilot Studio, but it is on a consumption or capacity kind of basis. So you're going to have to add messages per month to that to really utilize it. All right. And then the final set of Copilots, these are all meant for specific users and roles in your organization. So Copilot for Fabric, that's for your data scientists and your Fabric users. So in order to enable that, you have to, be using Fabric, and then you have to enable the Fabric Copilot, and it'll drag some other Copilots in with it once you enable it, like Copilot for Power BI, Data Factory, and then the Data Science and Data Engineering Copilot. The last three are for your business users. So Copilot for D365, a lot of the features in there were already part of D365. They're just being repackaged and presented with a different chat user interface, basically. There will be Copilot functionality that is continually coming out and improving and increasing along all of the modules. There is a little bit of functionality included for basically all of the modules already, Business Central, Customer Service, all of them. And that functionality will be included in the enterprise and premium versions of the Dynamics 365 licensing. Now, there's two more that seems like they would probably overlap with those D365. So let me explain why they don't necessarily. So Copilot for Sales and Copilot for Service, they're both expected to be about $50 per user per month, and they will be licensed on a per user basis. The Copilot for Sales, it was available February 1st, so you can buy that now. The benefit to this is it's going to connect to your other CRM solutions, not just Dynamics. And it's going to support your sales people as they're talking to customers. It's going to give them that extra interface into Teams where they can start putting in data for your CRM solutions as they're talking to customers in Teams. It's going to help summarize meetings. It's an entire sales package meant to support your salespeople in other CRM solutions and Dynamics as well. And then the last one, Copilot for Service, is still in preview. But the idea behind that is your customer service agents will then, it's going to connect to like supply chain management, inventory, warranty data, things like that. So when your customer service agents are talking to customers and they're dealing with a customer issue, they're going to have a lot more access faster to the information they need for just a better experience in supporting customers. So again, really the takeaway here, there's a ton of Copilots, there's a ton of use cases. You can customize it. There is so many options here. So if you don't think that what you're trying to do with Copilot is going to fit in easily and nicely with Copilot for M365, for example, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about how to get Copilot to work for you. And so Craig's going to talk a little bit more about Copilot Studio and creating your own Copilots and really how Invero can help with that. So Craig.
Great. Thanks a lot, Steph. Steph started off by introducing herself as a licensing geek, and she's not going to go into the technology. Now we're switching gears. I'm definitely not a licensing geek. I'm more of a technology geek. So hold on to your horses here. So anyway, Steph talked mostly about Copilots there, right? She introduced some concepts like Copilot Studio, AI Builder, so on and so forth. This graphic here from Microsoft really talks about how it all interconnects. So you got the different Copilots across the top that Steph talked about, as well as on the right, building custom Copilots. This is all underpinned by Copilot Studio, where you can extend your existing environment and data into all of those Copilots. You can extend Copilot for M365 to access more data than what's just in your M365 graph tenant. You can extend it to like data lakes and so on if you choose, or you can build custom copilots. And that's really where it gets interesting if you want to build out more complex things than are what are available out of the box. On top of that, then this is all underpinned by many different services. They're not all shown here that are hosted on Azure and elsewhere, but primarily Azure, where you got the bot framework, which is a development toolkit and framework. AI Studio, I'm going to talk a bit about. There's other things like Azure Cognitive Services, so on and so forth. So it's just, there's a whole ecosystem that Microsoft is building geared towards AI and all this generative AI in particular. And to that point, a lot of people think, well, a Copilot is just a chatbot, correct? So I'm going to dispel that myth because a chatbot is very rigid in how they're built. They're given defined text that they're looking for, and you can have multiple search terms. But if the search term is not met, you're going to get, say as a customer service chatbot, the customer is going to get very frustrated if they're typing in something the chatbot just doesn't understand. So it can't go beyond what has been trained, and really it's like a bunch of if then else statements behind the scenes, if you want to think of it that way from a technical standpoint. This is where chatbots kind of extend that to the next level and into more conversational AI in that realm, because copilots can take what an end user, or say a customer service example, what the customer's typing in, and then ground that prompt on your data. You can provide the chatbot or Copilot chatbot with specific data so that it understands when it gets a prompt, it can iterate through and then respond with the appropriate context. So it's much more powerful than just a chatbot, is what I'm just trying to show here. So I'm not going to go too deep on each of the elements, but Steph talked a bit about Copilot Studio and how it used to be called Power Virtual Agents. I actually remember the day, I think it was on the Build conference or Ignite last year, where Microsoft announced Copilot Studio, and I happened to be in Power Virtual Agents, and one day it was Power Virtual Agents was the header of, and then the next day it was Copilot Studio. So it was literally the same application, but it's a great setup because it's a low code type interface, which I've got just a brief screenshot there on the right. So you don't have to be a full-on developer to be able to build your own chatbots. You can really take it to the next level and play around with it without too much training. But what they've done now, Microsoft has extended it to integrate more easily with the large language models. So bringing that generative AI capability into Copilot Studio has really been powerful. Steph touched on the pricing for this already, but I just want to say or highlight that it's not a per user price, it's a per tenant, and then of course the number of messages. But I think for $200 a month, it's a very reasonable price for companies that want to start experimenting with building their own copilots. All right, going a bit deeper then, Azure OpenAI Service. You may or may not have heard of this, but what I like to consider it as is it's ChatGPT in your own tenant using your own data in a secure fashion. And what I mean by that is this is Microsoft's answer to the problem that a lot of people were raising when ChatGPT came out, and people were excited, putting prompts in, and some people were pasting in corporate data that might be sensitive or not. And if you read the end user agreement from OpenAI for ChatGPT, they say that they may use your data in enhancing their large language models in the future. So big concerns for a lot of companies, but they wanted to take advantage of these large language models. So Microsoft came out with OpenAI Service on Azure, and it's essentially ChatGPT, but with all these models made available in your own tenant. None of the prompts are sent back to OpenAI or even Microsoft. It all stays within your own environment. You can see the pricing there on the bottom for GPT 3.5, GPT-4, and the different flavors. Pretty reasonable, pennies. But when you look at it, it depends on how much usage you're doing. So it's priced on a per token basis, and per 1,000 tokens, which equates to about 750 words. So if you got a prompt and you're uploading a bunch of documents and content to the prompt and it's about 3,000 words, that's gonna equate to about 4,000 tokens. So and then there's also limits, and you can see like the 4K, 16K, 128K versions of these models. They're all priced differently because they take larger prompts. So more content can be provided, and then of course better, more informed responses. It's not available in all regions on Azure today, so that's one thing to be aware of. If you have data residency concerns or what have you, just check and see where they are and if they meet your requirements. And also in preview today, Microsoft does have additional models available. So DALL-E for image creation, Babbage, DaVinci, Whisper, and I'm sure there'll be more in the future. So now if you want to go even beyond that, Microsoft has the Azure AI Studio, and they've had this for many years now, and it's been evolving over time. But what essentially it is a framework and a tool set for developers to build not just generative AI applications, but machine learning models. You can leverage way more than just the OpenAI models, large language models. You can go with Hugging Face, Meta, open source models, and so on. There's also pre-built, pre-trained models in Azure AI Services, such as speech recognition or computer vision, which they're all pre-trained on very large data sets. So you don't have to go out and train a model on a data set to recognize, a car or a person or whatever in an image. You just pump that image to this AI service, and you get a response back. So this is all available, and obviously there's charges for each of the usages, and I'm not going to go into the details of the cost because there's so many different Azure resources underlying. There's compute and so on that tie into this. But the idea is, if you want to go all in on machine learning, you don't necessarily have to be a data scientist. You can build machine learning models if you've got large data sets and you want to experiment. The Machine Learning Studio in AI Studio is extremely powerful, easy to use, very similar interface to like a low-code type scenario. It's got lots of pre-trained models you can experiment with. So it's a great tool set to work from and build whatever AI solutions you're thinking of. So, all right, so where should you start? And I thought I would reference this CIO magazine article from September, which I felt really summarized it very well. That a good, successful generative AI strategy really starts with an effective pilot strategy. So and you can access the article with a QR code or link there if you choose. But what does that mean? And I'll sum it down to experimentation, jumping in, trying things out, familiarizing yourselves with AI and your company with AI is the best place to start. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of information and misinformation out there, but if you don't start, you're going to kind of fall behind. I saw a quote from the CEO of Cisco, I think it was, and he said, in the future, there's going to be two kinds of companies. There's going to be companies that have adopted AI, and there's going to be companies that have become irrelevant. So, that's a pretty powerful statement, but, there's maybe some truth to that. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon, but I think there is a real fear from some organizations that, how do we adopt this? What is it going to mean to our company? What if we don't understand it? What if we don't jump in? So that's why I kind of focus on the experimentation. I think that's the key part. But do you just dive in and start having developers building apps and chatbots, copilots, that sort of thing? The first step you need to do, if you follow the guidelines of this article, is really starting off identifying use cases, going out to your business, working with many people in the organization who are subject matter experts in their domain, and understand what they think AI is. Or you may need to do some training on base level to get everybody to the same level of understanding of what AI is. But then uncover, where do you think AI could be applicable? So you get, maybe dozens or hundreds of potential use cases. then you can kind of distill those down and figure out which ones are worthwhile exploring and take it to the next level. But what this is going to do is enable you to now kind of foster a culture of learning and create a safe space for innovation. So being able to work between IT and the business and sharing ideas and collaborating and building out some skills around AI technologies and really taking that fear out of it and not being afraid to jump all in and fail. Like there could be, the point of experimentation is fail fast, learn from it, move on. So building proofs of concept and experimenting, kind of creating that innovative culture and exploring enables that. But then you can take that learning and go to the next level. And if you're feeling like this is the investment path you want to make, building out an AI center of excellence. So taking those skills that the company has learned and then creating a team that is now kind of the body of knowledge for the entire company on AI and help drive that strategy forward. So as the quote says at the bottom, you can, good use cases can come from anywhere in the organization, but what you ultimately do need is support to go from a good idea to a prototype and or production ready solution. So if you go to the next slide, Sean, I'll kind of show what Invero is doing to help customers in this vein. We've developed this free business use case checklist, and it's a framework for organizations, and we'll be sending this out after the webinar, so you don't have to necessarily reach out to us. Our team will reach out and provide this as a PDF. But it helps to guide customers to get to that point where you maybe have an idea that you want to go to the next step and build a proof of concept. But it really starts out with ideation, and you can run workshops, you can get ideas, you can get, kind of like a suggestion box, virtual suggestion box online or whatever, people submitting ideas, whatever the ideation method that works for you and your organization, getting these ideas, getting people to think creatively, think outside of the box, gets that laundry list of here's some potential things that we might want to use AI for. Then taking those ideas and now developing use cases from them. So it's now going from an idea to defining what is this actually going to look like, and then it could go to the further step of what is the return on investment. If say the idea you break it down, this is going to save one person in this one unique role in the organization 5 minutes a day. But to do it, it's going to cost $1 million to build the solution. Is the ROI there? You're probably not going to move forward with it. But that's kind of that level you're going to go to, because then taking that information, you can prioritize. Now, so you have 100 potential use cases, prioritize those down, pick a handful. I don't recommend just sticking with one. Like clients we're talking to and working with are going down multiple paths. They're building a Copilot, they're building a machine learning model. They're just seeing what's going to work because they're getting pressure from their business and the executives to, what are we doing about AI? And that's what they're doing, is they're just trying to build these scenarios so they can come back and say, look, we've tried these and these succeeded, these failed. But it doesn't have to be a big investment, because doing a proof of concept is really a minimum viable product. So now that you've got that prioritized, call it, 2, 3, 5 use cases that you want to take to that next level and build a proof of concept, that's where Invero can help. So if you go to the next slide, we want to be able to get our clients to that stage of being ready to build a minimum viable product. And how we do this is it's a 1 month engagement, and we kind of start off with, once you've got the one use case we're going to work with you on, we're going to gather requirements, figure out what it is that we're building, and we're going to ask for one key objective for the MVP. We're obviously not going to be able to tackle all the problems and solve everything, but what is that one key thing that what we can turn back on and say this was a successful proof of concept. So let's focus on that, get that done in that 1 month, and then we'll have an actual working prototype at the end of it that can be used to showcase within the organization. But we're so excited about doing these kind of engagements. We're actually getting creative with how we're going about funding them. So Microsoft, you may or may not know, has funding programs that we can tap into to help offset some of the cost of building these, and is based on how much consumption is going to be driven into the cloud. But Invero is also co-investing too. So we're giving some of our time towards this, so that our clients don't have to bear the full cost. And we want to, we need to skill up in our team as well on this. This is an area that is so new for so many people that we want to make that investment and do it along, arm in arm with our clients. So Microsoft 365 Copilot, this is a good graphic, I think, that shows how it actually works and how it interacts. And if you follow the numbers on the diagram or on the bottom right side there, a user will type into M365 Copilot, they'll type in a prompt, and what happens is Copilot takes that prompt and goes out and accesses Graph. And if you're not familiar with Graph, it's basically the underpinning that has all access to everything in your tenant, from emails to files in SharePoint, Teams, your meetings, your calendar, email, and so on and so forth. So it's got access to all that data. There is an option to also extend Copilot to the internet, so you can have web access, web information also pulled into that prompt, or even grounding it on other services. There's connections, you can extend it to data lakes or what have you. So it's going to take that now and turn it into a prompt that it sends to the large language model. So think the GPT-3, GPT-4, whatever, large language model. Then it does its thing, comes back with a response to Copilot. Now Copilot takes that response and checks in with Graph again to make sure, from a compliance perspective, that it's not going to be surfacing any data that is sensitive, or that is that the user who typed in the prompt doesn't have permissions to access. So it's mentioning Purview there, and Purview is Microsoft's governance tool for data governance and overall system governance there. Purview has things like data sensitivity tagging. So Copilot will actually strip out any data that has a sensitivity tag to it, so that won't be surfaced. And also it recognizes permissions. So if a user doesn't have access to a specific SharePoint site or folder or a specific file, it's not going to pull that information in either. So it's very good in how it does that. Now, if you move to the next slide, that's kind of the next thing is, okay, it's great that Microsoft has built all of this, but what are the risks? And are you ready in your environment to jump in with both feet? So, as I said, it pulls in all your data. Everything that's in your M365 tenant, from emails to files and so on, is accessible and can be surfaced through M365 Copilot. This can lead to inadvertent access to sensitive information. And what I mean by that is, if somebody at some point in time, could have been 5 years ago, could have been last week, shared out a file, and that the way they shared it happened to be with the whole company, which is quite common, then that file now is accessible and will be potentially surfaced, not necessarily guaranteed to be surfaced, but it's accessible to Graph and won't be stripped out of the results if that is part of the prompt response. So that's the biggest thing that we're highlighting for customers that may or may not be on people's radar. There are other things, like people could ask inappropriate questions, and we're kind of recommending test in your environment. What happens if somebody's searching for somebody's salary? Does anything come back or whatever? There are safeguards in place. I will say Microsoft has built it with responsible AI in mind. So some of those prompts that you type in, it will respond back saying, I'm not able to respond to this question. So that's a good thing. But you may have like a top secret project in your environment, and that's codenamed XYZ. You want to ask some prompts about that project and see if or whatever does come back. And if that's a concern, figure out where the source of that data is and then lock it down. Another risk or drawback here is if all your data is not in M365 on your tenant. Very many companies still have a lot of data on-prem in file servers and so on. That data is not going to be accessible to Graph. So there's a lack of information then potentially that customers or end users are going to be able to pull back. So the more data you have in there, the more valuable the responses will be. Organizational change management is extremely important here too, and it was mentioned earlier. It's something to not forget about because there's a lot of hype. People will get their Copilot license and they'll be excited. They'll spend some time in there, but then after that hype wears off, they may just stop using it because it hasn't become a habit yet. So there are tools built in. Steph talked about the Copilot dashboard. There's other mechanisms that you can monitor the usage of Copilot, and then you can build your organizational change management training programs, communication, so on, to encourage that adoption and usage, because you don't want to be spending $500 Canadian a year for a license that doesn't get used. So it's important to kind of build that into your rollout planning. And Steph talked about the licensing dependencies, and then also important to note, there are specific versions of the desktop applications that need to be installed, so making sure that the end users are on the right deployment path. Next slide, please, Sean. Here's just a quick snapshot of what the Copilot dashboard is. I will say today it's pretty basic in the information that it's surfacing, but it's helpful, and it does provide some people with kind of a place to start and figure out how to be ready for the next or for the rollout. So what has Invero done to address this concern for our clients? There's a lot of people talking about Copilot readiness, and we have our own version of a Copilot readiness assessment, but where ours differs, and where I think that we've gone a lot deeper and provided the higher value is we built out our own proprietary intellectual property to do a deep dive into your data and actually surface all of the sites, Teams, email, all that stuff. Not email, sorry, but it's focused on the data, the more file data and folders, permissions that have been broken, and the term oversharing is what it's technically called, where files and folders have been shared with the entire organization that maybe you may not know they are. Out of the box, Microsoft provides a report in Purview that will tell you how the number of shares that have been done that have overshared, but they don't tell you where they are, so you can't go and remediate it. They also don't they don't go past 30 days. So if a file was shared prior to 30 days to the entire company, it won't show up in these reports. So because of those shortcomings, we decided to just build our own tool and make sure that we're providing the best results for our customers so that you can be prepared. So we have this. If you're interested in learning more, you can contact us. There's our contact information, and I'm sure our team will also be reaching out afterwards.
Greg, Steph, thanks so much. That was a fantastic overview and deep dive into Copilot and broader AI platforms. To our audience, thank you so much for participating here. As Craig's touched on a couple times, if you've got questions, now is a great time. Throw them in the IM or bring them on in an audible fashion. As we wrap up, I'll just want to prompt here a little bit. As I mentioned at the start of this call, this is our first Invero Show episode. We are so excited to bring this platform to you, and we've got a backlog of really interesting topics to share over the coming weeks and months. Invero Show episode number 2 is already scheduled. Invitations are going to go out for this here momentarily, but so excited for the next conversation that we're going to unpack here, which is the conversation around creating a culture of innovation through application modernization. We've got one of our great clients is going to join us, Mike Sparling, who wears such an interesting role in that he's the COO and the CTO, right? So he's literally got a leg in the business and a leg in the technology that serves the business, and somebody we've worked with for a few years now on a number of fronts, but in particular helping them modernize their application sets, and then that story of how that's helped them create a more innovative culture within their organization. But we've also got Michael Thibodeau joining us. Some of you may know Michael. He's a senior leader at Microsoft Canada and is the lead for App Innovation Canada. So just a tremendous amount of depth on the topic. And then, of course, Craig, our CTO and founder here, is going to join that conversation as well. So just a little teaser for the next show. We'll make sure that all of you are invited to that. And if that's of interest, we'd love to see you on that. But back to this one, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found value in the discussion and how Steph and Craig have unpacked what the heck is going on with Copilot, what's here now, what might be coming, the things to think about, the different options. And maybe just to close it out here, Steph touched on it many times, as did Craig, of just reach out to us. Like, there's so much to think about and so much to navigate. It's not simple by any means. I'm so privileged. I know Ian feels this way as well, to get to work with Steph and Craig and the rest of our technical team here that have wrote scripts and figured this stuff out. It's a privilege to be part of this organization that's leaning in to this advanced technology. We'd love to chat with you and figure out how we can help you. Thank you all for joining the Invero Show today. Have a great rest of your day.